Faithfully podcast where determination meets devotion.
Follow us across all streaming platforms at linktr.ee/hustle faithfully podcast. As we continue this series of From Burnout to Breakthrough, we have brought you some incredible guests, and today is definitely no different. We had the one and only Ron Early on with us. We're looking real forward to hearing from him and about some of his challenges along the way of his entrepreneurial journey, as well as possibly some life journeys. So without further ado, let's turn it over to Ron and hear some more of his stories about From Burnout to Breakthrough. Welcome to the Hustle Faithfully podcast, Ron. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure for you guys having me on here. I very much appreciate you guys taking the time today. And I really like what you guys are doing here because I feel like every single person can relate to a story coming from some kind of burnout or running into some kind of, I don't want to say stonewall, but every entrepreneur hits that wall. They hit that plateau where you feel like maybe there's times where you question yourself whether or not you're doing the things that you're supposed to be doing, or if it's right, or is it really worth it, And I would almost challenge that if anybody is going through that, they never ask that at least once. Maybe they're not even doing it right,
Mm-hmm.
And through the climb and doing several of these podcasts over the course of the last year has made me realize one thing. And we go through a lot as entrepreneurs for what seems like a very short amount of time, or it could seem like a long amount of time, but it's a lot shoved into a very short amount of time. And me specifically, I get asked sometimes on shorter podcasts, like these jumps over the span of the last decade of what I've been doing in entrepreneurism. And there's so many different stories that are tied into the last 10 years. You can't really just tie it down to one point. And we go through like these quantum leaps, it almost seems like. And it seems like, honestly, when I go back through it, that it took such an extensive amount of time, but there's so many periods where it was kind of like the right jump at the right time to go through what you would call a burnout in order for that overnight success part to happen. And there's so many different levels, different parts to overnight successes. And as I recall some of the memories and I talk with some people about some stories that I went through, I was like, man, this just kept happening time and time and time again. And luckily, my wife is just as crazy as I was for her to believe me in half the stuff that we've gone through.
Right.
I have a rock beside me, which is one of the main reasons why I've been able to pull off a lot of what I've been able to do.
Mm-hmm.
She makes me feel a little bit more sane in some of the decisions that I make, even though sometimes they might be a little off the wall.
Right.
But they're God directed, and I do feel like we're very much in the position that we're supposed to be because of them.
Mm-hmm.
So some of these hardships and challenges, one of the very first things I did just in entrepreneurism is I stepped away from a high-paying six-figure job at a very, very young age, and giving that up is difficult because I dropped out of college to take on that job. The problem is, over the course of probably say a year and a half, all my time was dedicated to traveling the state of Florida. I was teaching sales directors how to sell personal training and UFIT and an LA Fitness. And I was making so much money in the gyms, but I was trading all of my time to do it for a very small amount of money that I was bringing in, which made no sense. So I'm very tight with my family. We have a very close family. So explaining to my father that I was leaving college to go do this job, it didn't go over so well. And then started doing really well. And then when I told him I quit, that was a whole different spiral of conversations.
Right.
At that time, me and my wife had been together for 4 going on 5 years. And this whole entire time, we thought we weren't going to be able to have kids. At least that was one of the things that was explained to us. So in the span of quitting this job and moving over to, chase this journey that we had going on, we had some money that was set back, a little over $36,000 at the time. And we were going to get a house. I wanted to put a down payment on it. I wanted to furnish it and then have a little money set aside for like our startup. We're going to be ready to go. In that time span of quitting that job, I found out I had my first son on the way.
Wow. Wow.
So it seemed like it was very inopportunistic. It was very scary, very exciting for us. We were very much in denial. There was a ton of emotions. Everything was just super heightened. One of the craziest things in the world I felt like I could go through at that time was like, what's the chances of this timing to work out this way?
Yeah.
We moved over to the other coast of Florida And at the time, I had moved into a spare room for my parents in my parents' house until we were ready to get this other house ready to go. So it's supposed to be like a very temporary situation. This is where part of the chaos starts to happen, and the story gets a lot crazier before it ever gets better.
Right.
So prepare yourselves. Uh, I wanted to pay attention to what was going on in the marketplace, and one of the big booms was construction. I mean, Sarasota County was one of the fastest growing counties in the entire U.S. I think it was ranked like number 2 by population size. So it made sense to get into some kind of populace. I mean, my father ran a construction company, and part of the reason why he never run a business is because he was. I do think that now and where I am, I understand the difference between a business owner and an entrepreneur.
Right.
A lot of business owners, they can make a lot of cash flow inside a business, but they never find a way to step outside the business. They always get stuck working in it. And it's a massive issue, especially when you're in, hot, sunny Florida, pouring concrete and laying block all day, every day, and you can't seem to pull yourself out of that. So I can fully understand where he's coming from. And I don't know if you gentlemen are fathers, but us as fathers, we want to make sure that we do our best to provide for our children. So I understood it. I wish we could have, met eye to eye a little bit more through that process. And I hate saying this out loud. It almost makes me want to choke, but I can't wait to be like this way with my kids. But he was right. He was right. I took a gamble on something that seemed like it was going to work out. And long and behold, out of that $36,000, I lost 24 grand. How I lost the 24 grand is every single person that's listening to this right now. At some point in time, you've wanted to leverage the bank's money through a business entity. But every single bank you go to tells you have to have that business entity operating for at least 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I ran into that situation, and I couldn't leverage my personal credit at the time because I didn't have enough built. It's one of those things that I do want to teach my kids, and the importance of like financial literacy is credit stacking.
Mm-hmm.
I had none. What I knew growing up was debt was bad.
Yeah.
Debt's great if it's utilized properly.
That's right.
Right.
So I go to buy this floor grinder after I'm knocking around. This is part of what we were doing for this construction business, was prepping these garage floors, and these places were going up. It's one of the things that people that did concrete didn't necessarily want to do. It took too much time, and it was almost like a secondary operation. So I decided to create a business out of it. And we were renting floor grinders at the time, and I was literally literally door knocking, trying to see what we could book at the time. And then I ended up meeting a contractor, and there's this city called Boca Grande that's not far from Sarasota. It's big money, right on the water, building up a development. And I ended up booking up the whole entire community. So my uncle quit his job, gave him out this offer, said, I'm going to need some help. We got to go pick up this floor grinder. This is on a Thursday, random Thursday. He's like, all right, if you're sure, I'm in. Cool. I go talk to my wife. I'm like, listen, I found these floor grinders. I can't rent them. There's going to be way too many to do. We can finish out all 4 of these jobs. I'm going to make back triple the amount of money in a 4-month span than what I'm going to spend. Get our foot in the door. We'll start creating a name. Testimonials, get the company name out in the open. So it made the most sense.
Right.
That was on Friday. I am pulling this $24,000 grinder with this $1,200 F-150 OBS that it was the wildest thing in the world, pulling this piece of equipment that was literally 24 times the cost of this truck, hoping that and I get there on Monday only to find out the contractor got fired.
Oh, no.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was a very tough beat. So I got my uncle that I've convinced now to quit his job to come help me do this for a pretty good substantial pay that I no longer can pay. I'm stuck with a grinder I can't return. That's 2/3 of our savings set aside. I have a child on the way that we didn't think that we were going to have, and I just threw away 2/3 of what was going to help me move out of my parents' house.
Wow.
Ron. Yeah. Okay. In that moment, seriously, in that moment, when you found out that the contractor had gotten fired, what is the first thing that went through your mind? Because I know all these things have happened, and then suddenly the last thing you expect to have happen is for this contractor to get fired. What was your thought at that moment?
When I tell you I was glowing when we pulled up and walking in there, and I thought like I did it, like I figured it out. I couldn't believe I got struck gold. having that first, looking for him first was the biggest issue. And then
Mhm.
walking up, the guy's name was Kevin. Walk
Mhm.
up and find out that Kevin got let go. I never got a phone call. I never got a text message. I didn't even know who I was supposed to speak to see if I was able to book these out. But from what I knew, they were rehiring because everybody that I knew that was on that job site that previous week was no longer there.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow, man. So was that one of those moments for you where you felt like, okay, I may have just flamed out? Like I quit this job coming out of college. I left college first. I quit college first. Then
Yeah.
I went and took this job. You know, you're going around. You're working in these gyms. You're making good money. And then, okay, I'm going to leave that. I'm going to do something else now. You know, and then you leave that to go and buy this. You go to buy this grinder, and you pull up on this site to find this guy that has this opportunity for you, and he's gone. You know, in this, and you got a child that you didn't expect on the way, the child you didn't think you could have, with all that stuff going on. Like, was that a moment where you said to yourself, time out, I may be in the midst of a flame out?
I thought I made so many wrong decisions.
Yeah.
So many wrong decisions. I needed time to collect my thoughts and figure out how I was going to go tell my wife this terrible mistake it felt like I made, and everything's 2020, especially like hindsight looking back. I do believe like a lot of the things that we do, we could say like they all happen for a reason, but I do believe that maybe it's not that they all happen for a reason, but they do present opportunities that we never knew were available.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing that I can take away is everybody likes to throw around that right place, right time moment. But the truth of the matter is, if you're not prepared for a right place, right time moment, one will never present itself.
That's right.
Ooh, you're so right.
So,
Wow.
How do you get prepared for that, Ron? When you may not even know what opportunity you're looking for. How do you prepare for that when it's an unknown entity?
That is a double-edged sword and a fully loaded question. And here's the reason why I say that. Even as I've started to grow this crazy infrastructure for what we have going on right now, and I just exited a 7-figure business in January. I'm working on making this 8 into a 9, coming from someone that, had a hard time affording groceries. Like there's been a substantial climb there. And it seems like you're even making money. There's a point to where I'm getting to this. It seems like I'm doing good and I'm making money. And I had made the point earlier about being a businessman, being an entrepreneur. And I think another differentiating factor there is just the amount of education that you take on and understanding how to operate money. You need to learn money and what to do with money. Because if I'm making all this money only to give back, a third of it, 33% of it to the government every year, I don't know money. And that's a lost opportunity. That's a big issue. I need to understand how to funnel money, how to open up policies and trusts and what tax write-offs are, how to dump those into other businesses, how to set things up for my kids, things that are untaxed. And if not, then that's another missed opportunity in itself. So I just think that one of the most important things that you can do as an entrepreneur in understanding money is understanding the terms that fluctuate around money. Take the time to read a tax book. It's the most boring thing in the world that you'll do. But even if you go through tax code, most of the tax code, 75% of tax code is teaching you what not to pay for taxes. It's extensive, but it's a better thing for you to understand what not to throw away your money on, because I have never in my life paid a single bill out to the government and thought that they were going to use my money better than I could.
Right.
That's never crossed my mind. The problem is it's more like the how. Even opening up some of these other opportunities, like I found myself in a very sticky situation, exiting the business, the sales and marketing business that I was telling you guys about that we just exited in January. I have 2 units that's connecting to this unit that I'm sitting in right now. And it cost me $10,200 a month for the other unit. Now the other entity is gone. The landlords won't let me let that go. Oh, wow. So I have nothing occupying it, right? And we run an investment firm, so it's not even in my realm for the solution I came up with, but I learned about this place called Pure Space. Now we record content, and every now and then we'll do a podcast and we'll get some content out, very similar to you gentlemen, but it's like a side project for us for exposure.
Mhm.
So instead I set up 5 stations in there because in Pure Space, it's $125 an hour, a minimum booking of, 4 hours through that booking, which is $500 a pop for a half a day. 2,500 if I book all out for half a day, and $5,000 a day. And I'm only recording maybe once a week. So now I open up, I got $20,000 cash flowing every week in a space that's not utilized. I don't run a multimedia center. I run an investment firm.
Right.
Now I just turned a $120,000 loss into a $380,000 gain.
Right.
That's understanding cash flow and money and just paying attention to the things that you do. I just got myself a free content space paid for and then some.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So that's why I say it's important to continue to educate, because if I didn't know that something like that existed, or I didn't understand how to operate it, I can't put somebody in control to turn a negative into a positive.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure. Always continue learning. Always find those that have what you want and mirror and match what they do to achieve same or similar results. So that's very intriguing that you share that. How could somebody contact you? How could somebody find out about you and what you do and what you offer? I have no doubt that our listeners and our viewers will find value in what you offer. So tell us how we can find you.
Yeah, so I'm across all social media platforms. If you go through state accreditation, which I know this is probably a little bit more unorthodox for what you hear from listeners, we're probably one of the only state accredited investment groups in the state of Florida, which is something I'm very proud of. Just last year, we were awarded the key to the city in Sarasota, Florida, which I know we've mentioned is one of the fastest growing cities, in the US. So it's kind of surreal, looking back on that. I actually just had a post pop up. So you guys can find me on Instagram, but they do the recollection memories. And the caption I put in there was, I can remember thinking with my wife, how are we going to afford to live in the most expensive city in our area, to I'm being awarded key to the city by the mayor and the most expensive city around us. So that jump was just, it's surreal, even still thinking about it. That climb it's very rewarding. We'll tell you that. It's a great right place, right time moment, right?
Let me say this. Congratulations on that, because you could have quit when you walked in after purchasing that grinder. You spent $24,000 of the, I believe you said 36 that you all had. Yeah. And you got your uncle to leave a job that he was on to come and support what you were doing. And then you walk in, and the guy that was giving you the opportunity to recoup the investments that you made and then make profit off of the grinder is no longer there. You turned that around to being able to grow one 7-figure company, turn this into an 8-figure company while working towards 9 figures and getting the key to the city in a place that you had no idea that you would even be able to survive in. Man, yeah. If I had another mic, I'd drop it. I just can't drop this. But hey, listen, Ron, that's amazing. And I just had to take the time to congratulate you, because you are a prime example to the people listening on the radio that will listen, and the people that are watching, of what it means to go through a period where you could have burned out.
Right.
Yeah.
To be in a place now where you're living in breakthrough.
I appreciate your words. I very much do. And just in case you guys don't do pop-ups too, I'm not sure what's running it. I know I said across all social media platforms, but just to take a step back, my personal social media too on all platforms is Sales God. And then you'll find the investment company, which will automate a cash flowing business for you. I'll grow an asset for you. It does. Cash flows month over month, compounds year over year, and we operate in wholesale. That company's called Automation Empire. So if you guys want
AutomationEmpire.com.
Yes, we are on AutomationEmpire.com. And then again, all social media platforms. And I do a very good job of just trying, at least I'll say I try my best to do a very good job at explaining for people that are not just like newcomers into the investment world, but even people that aren't first-time investors, just being able to provide value and understanding where to store that money, how to cash flow that money. And maybe it's different terminologies to separate that difference between, business person and investor or entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
We heard an amazing story about somebody who gave everything, legitimately gave everything in the midst of fear. My wife and I was watching a TV program last night, and the people on it announced everybody knew they were pregnant already. But then they showed the ultrasound, and they were pregnant with twins. And my wife said, "Did you see his face?" I said, "Yeah, he's scared to death." And that's just part of, bringing a new child into the world. It's a scary thing, even if you know that you can financially provide for it, especially when you are questioning if you can financially provide for it. But then being told that you can't have kids, and then here you are pregnant, and all of this other stuff is going on, man. If there's a burnout story that we've heard, Ricardo, that one wins it right there.
You better believe it.
And he didn't give up. He didn't throw in the towel. He kept pushing through and turned a $24,000, I'm not going to say mistake, because it's a learning experience, and we learn more in our downfalls than we do when everything's going great. But 24,000 out of 36,000, 2/3 of everything that you have. Now you have no job, and you keep pushing through. And now you're talking about going to 9 figures.
Yeah.
Again, like Ricardo said, congratulations on all that.
Thank you, guys. I very, very much appreciate it. And if it's to any contributing value to anybody else listening, and you guys find yourself in a position like this, I would strongly encourage you not to give up. There's one book that changed my, and outside of the Bible, but there's one book that business-wise helped me make better educated decisions, and it was called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. And that story got again, I told you guys, it got so much worse before it got better. My thought was to go to the gym and try and cool off some steam blow off some steam before, I went home, and I talked to my wife, and it's Friday or Monday, I'm sorry, in the middle of the day at this point. And I had just taken a couple scoops of pre-workout. I was going to go try and clear my head. And in the midst of working out, I keep having this one person. By the way, we're all human. I'm not the most perfect person in the world, even though, we try to be. That was one of those times I didn't want to be bothered. So I was doing my best not to be rude, but he just kept following me around, asking me questions. And this is one of those things I told you guys, I was very heavily involved in the gym at the time. So I stood out. There was a reason why I kept getting pestered, but at the same time, people that were working day jobs also weren't working out in the middle of the day on a Monday.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that should have been one of the things that I paid attention to. And I finally took out my headphone, and this guy was asking me about some of these exercises I was doing so he could get a certain piece of muscle development. I don't even remember what it was that he was specifically talking about. All I remember is his phone just kept dinging, ding, 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 ding. And eventually, I don't know what it was in the middle of the conversation. I just asked him what is that? And he turned around and he showed me his phone. And this is the story of actually how this whole investment opportunity came to life. And he goes, this is what I do. I sell on Amazon. So he showed me his store. And every time that ding was going off, it was him making store sales. So he's making money while we're having that conversation. Mm-hmm. Right. And I, in the past, had dabbled with this drop shipping model on eBay, but it was nothing like substantial to where you could live off of it. It's more of like side hustle income, right? Just so we could stack a little bread, and if we wanted to put it somewhere, we'd be able to do so. And what he was explaining to me and the numbers he was showing me was not just livable income. It was like extravagant income, and it was very early on set. Now, mind you, I told you guys, 36 grand, spent 24 grand. So now I'm down to 12 grand. This guy goes, I have a mentorship I host every single week at the end of Friday, but it's $10,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And so now you're down to 2,000, I assume.
Right.
Now I'm down to $2,000.
Yeah, I was about to say, because that's one of those where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you see the opportunity, and you got somebody who's willing to show you how to do what you had an idea of, but didn't know it could be what he was doing.
That was really it, and I never wanted to put myself in a situation again. I rolled the dice, and at the time, what was going through my head was, I thought I was doing the right things. I want to do my best to take care of my family. I want to be able to provide for my wife. I want to be able to provide for my son. I tried to set up my uncle for this opportunity. I put us in a hole. Now I put him in a hole. At the very least, if I was gonna roll the dice on something, I wasn't gonna put anybody else in harm's way.
Right.
I didn't want to put him in another bad position. So this seemed right. And I knew I couldn't go back to doing the door knocking, especially paying this piece of equipment off and trying to get my cash back. It would take me forever.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I couldn't have hit, another contractor somewhere, but the chances of all that were just so extremely low compared to being able to do this out of my household and develop relationships, which is one of the things that I learned really kicks off Amazon, because he was teaching a drop shipping model, which worked at the time. And I think even to this day, some people still kind of rule out with the drop shipping model. But if it wasn't for his mentorship, it wouldn't have put my foot in the door to come up with my own model, which is how I started out the FBA model. Logistically, it took more. There's a lot more nurturing of relationships and provided documentation and becoming, I'll say it's more of a legal operating policy, especially through Amazon's eyes and creating an asset. And that's when I started learning about online asset building.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of times people like to think of like real estate as like the forefront of wealth. And there are a lot of wealth building opportunities in real estate. I'm diversified in real estate. I think that you should do both.
Right.
The only reason why that's the biggest forefront of wealth is because digital assets just haven't been around quite as long. I mean, the multiplier for what you can do in some of these storefronts is just, it's so hard to wrap your head around, because when it comes to investing in, now you can do multi-unit, which, carries a heavier load, but you can't really increase the value of the multi-units. Or if I buy a house, I can buy age around it. That'll increase the value. I can add a pool. That'll increase the value, but I hit a ceiling, no pun intended, but I hit a ceiling there. With wholesale, it's how much money I can essentially provide to put into wholesale products, which cash flows me more money on a month-to-month basis, but also intrinsically increases the value on an annual basis. So I directly hold the key to how much I want that asset to sell for. There are some people selling these storefronts for $600,000, $800,000 after 2 to 3 years. And they cash flow them every month and get their investment back first.
So you have a lot of different. I'm sorry, Ron. I thought you were done. I didn't want to interrupt you because you're giving people a lot of great information right now.
No.
I didn't. Now, were you done? Just then, I was going to ask you a quick question.
Oh, please.
Okay. Well, for the people that are listening right now, what are some things that they could do today with where they are? Because people will always feel, well, I got to get this together first, so I have to do that, or I don't know how to do this, and there's all these reasons why they can't start now. With everything you've experienced and everything you've gone through, what is some advice to someone who's in a place where they don't feel like they can start now because they don't have everything in place, or they don't think they have everything in place? What do they do with where they are? How do they start?
I think I might answer this question a little bit differently than most people. And I would actually say that if you don't feel comfortable because you don't have the right personal assets, like a skill set, get a job for the time being, but put the money into whatever skill set you want to learn and continue to study communication. Communication is the one skill set that universally apply to everything, especially now that we're in like this digital age. So we're not used to having a conversation. Most people can't even look people in the eye. It's wildly discouraging for, what this next generation looks like, but learn that. Because it helps you stand out monumentally. It's not about being better. It's about being different. That's what makes you stand out. Right? So communicate. And then study a skill set that provides value. And if you can do those two things and you still think that you're not ready, at that point, you just got to put yourself out there. You're learning fundamentally the two things that are needed. Those two things are what are needed to make money. Just those two.
How do you encourage to learn communication? Because I 100% agree. That is the forefront. That is the foundation of everything. Where did you learn communication, and what would you suggest for our viewers and listeners to learn to better their communication with people?
Oh man, I can go on a tangent about this right now. I appreciate the question. Communication psychology it's a love of mine. And when I first got put in the sales job that I was in, I changed how UFIT operated at the time. Ironically, when I quit that job, one thing that I didn't tell you guys, and it was another Stonewall, another burnout. Through quitting, the day after I got there, you needed to have an exercise science degree to be what was called a director. And the directors are the people that did the assessments to assign new clients to the trainers. So I quit college. I showed up there, had a job for 24 hours, no longer had a director to assign me any clients. So I had no way to make money. And we were one of 12 clubs in the district that didn't have any directors. Our club had the highest grossing sales out of the whole entire district, and we're the only one that didn't have a director. So immediately I drew a bunch of attention to myself by floor pulling people and selling them on personal training because I had to find a way to make money. They created a position in that company that was called the DIT that converted a trainer into a director without having a degree. And that was because of me. So I went around, and when I was teaching these other people how to do what I was doing and how I was selling training, one, I hit two really, really big hiccups. One, everybody was twice my age, and it was, what is this kid going to teach me? I've been doing this for years.
Right.
And two, I didn't understand how I was doing the things that I was doing, let alone being able to teach them to somebody else. I didn't know why they worked. It was just like a high level of, I guess, charisma and confidence in what I was doing and displaying that to other people to get them to buy into what I had to provide.
Right.
So I would sit with a couple psychology students that didn't live very far from where we were at. And I picked up, different sales books. And the problem that I ran into with sales books is there were a lot of like hard sales tactics, and it was very, I would say, like outdated information. I think that's changed since then. It's part of the reason why I put out and I published a book, Closer. I put that out. I did a bestseller on pre-release, which was pretty fantastic. It's a pretty big accomplishment in 2021. And it did really well. There are so many places for people to extract resources on communication now that you can literally take courses. I took a Stanford psychology course on YouTube for free. It's on there. Wow. It was boring, and I didn't learn anything that I wanted to learn, but it was accessible. But there are other people that host these courses, and they'll break down things like tone, the way you make eye contact, how you're supposed to carry yourself in your body language, understanding how to communicate and take pauses in the things that you say, how to elevate your tone, how to storytell. All those things are so important.
Right.
So important. So if you needed a first starting point, I say all that to say this, very first starting point is just go Google effective communication, and then find out this 5 terms on effective communication, and then go YouTube videos with each term and see what active practices people have. The only way that you're ever going to get better at doing something is if you actively practice it.
That's right.
So 3 of the things that I've heard you say in different ways, maybe not these things verbatim, but just a synopsis of what I've heard from you is you have to change your mindset, increase your skill set, and it produces assets. That those are the things that you have to do. And I just said that because for the people that listen, it's like, okay, what do I need to do? I've heard all the things he said. He simply said, change your mindset, increase your skill set, and it produces assets. And you're giving people ways to do that. So man, Ron, it's been good. Brother, I appreciate everything you're sharing because it's so practical. And I want you to let the people know where they can find you also. Like all the places. I know you're on social media. What are some other resources that you have? I know you have Automation Empire. that you said is on social media. Are there any other resources or any other suggestions for book reading or anything else that you think that people should really invest in or look into in order to grow in the way that you've suggested that they grow?
Yeah, without a doubt. Specifically, you should study a few different types of books. One should be on personal development, one should be on communication, and one should be on business or money. Always study those three different types of books. Those are wildly important. I would say that A Modern Day Think and Grow Rich is a book by MJ DeMarco called Millionaire Fastlane. That book everybody should pick up and they should read. I did a very good job, and it's not to pat myself on the back, but I spent a lot of time on that book, Closer, and it breaks down different frameworks. The things that I teach you to do inside that book, I wrote the book the same way. So it's through storytelling, emotional pools. It talks framing tactics, how to identify character traits so you can essentially take on a tone for the character that you want to become, but also identify the person that you're speaking, to. That way you have adaptable traits. I think a lot of times people think that they don't click with other people. You can change that. Like everything is positionable. You just need to know how to be able to do it. So pick that book up. And I would say Tax-Free Wealth is a very good book too. It's not quite as it's not as hard to swallow and digest.
Okay.
Out of all the tax books that I've gone through, that one's a little bit easier to break down and be able to process. It allowed me to ask the right questions to my CPA so I can get the right answers.
Man, that's a lot of great resource.
Absolutely. There has been so many nuggets dropped, so many incredible stories. We'd like to thank you for your time. Do you have one more story that you can leave our listeners and our viewers with to help encourage them again for if they feel like giving up, if they feel defeated, if they feel beat down, just to get up and keep going and keep pushing through?
Yeah, I do. Guys, if you've been listening to the story that I've been talking about in the startup, the whole success, I only had $2,000 left in my pocket, but I knew that I had to figure out what I was going to do to make this business successful in a nutshell. And I just said that the last thing that I wanted to do was extract resources from my family, but I now had a proven model, and I saw dollar signs going into my Amazon account at the time. I knew that I had made profit. It just hadn't deposited from my Amazon bank account to my business bank account yet. And one of the big no-nos in Amazon is you don't want to slow down on sales. One thing that I didn't know, and it wasn't taught in my class that I took at the time, and maybe it's just because he didn't have people take it quite as seriously as I was willing to take it. There is something called a velocity review that Amazon does, where if you sell too much too quick, they freeze all your assets. I sold $2,000 worth of product in 2.5 days, and it's a 14-day deposit. So I wanted to recoup as much as I could. So we leveraged a $5,000 credit card that my grandmother let me use. And I told her I'd give her all the profit for it. I just wanted it back, like on the card, so I could get her credit, use the card, didn't want to get flagged on store sales, and I give her all the profit off of it. And it would all go back into her account. It was getting deposited in 12 days. They held my money for 62 days.
Wow.
I had to now, after all this, I just lost the 36K. I stuck with the grinder I can't use. I'm in my parents' house, right? I figured the Amazon thing out. Amazon thing's working. I'm cash flowing in that. I spent all my money on that. I had a little set aside for groceries. I started leveraging the credit card. And now my money got held up here. And now I got to go tell my grandmother that I don't know when I'm getting the money back, but the money's there and I can't pay her for credit card. If I didn't go through any of that, I wouldn't be where I am. And I wouldn't have quite as many zeros sitting in a bank account or a team. Honestly, is the thing that I'm most proud of. Is not just the money sitting in the account, but the opportunities I'm able to provide that sit in this office with me and they grind on a day-to-day basis.
I know that all. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's just everybody in here works so hard. And the number one thing you hear as an entrepreneur, especially in this space, like it's almost just thrown around like buzzwords, is, surround yourself with the right people. But no one ever really tells you how to do that. It's like one of the most difficult things in the world to do. We've created that here. And I'm very proud of that. Very proud of that.
That's awesome. And I know that it's taught you, I can hear it in your voice and I can see it in your countenance, that it's taught you a level of gratitude that you have to earn. You can't just purchase this somewhere. You have to go through something and come out of it to really be grateful for where you are. And I can see that you are a grateful person, and you treat the people around you well because you know how it is when things aren't going well. And you're in a position now to help change their lives, and not just people you don't know, but everyone in your circle that you do know, and to elevate them, because elevating them helps elevate you.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the truth. It's one of the biggest ways to create culture inside a company.
Yeah,
right there.
That's awesome, Ron. That's awesome, brother. Once again, congratulations on every single thing that you've accomplished. And I want to say congratulations on the things that you have yet to accomplish, because of what I know from what I've seen in you and everything I've heard about you, there's a reason you succeeded. There's a reason that there's still much more in front of you than what's behind you. And I see a lot of great things ahead of you just because of the mindset that you have, the people that you have around you, and then your desire to not just increase your net worth, but the net worth of everyone you come into contact with.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's an amazing thing, man. Like I said, congratulations, brother.
Yes. Thank you, Ron, for being with us today on the Hustle Faithfully podcast. It has been an absolute honor hearing your stories. Everybody, find him on Instagram at SalesGod, on Facebook and on LinkedIn at Ron Early, EARLEY, on TikTok at SalesGodOfficial, and you can also find him at automationempire.com and wholesaleautomationllc.com. Get over there and let him help you out and grow your net worth and your assets as well. Ron, again, thank you. Remain blessed and unstoppable. And everybody, until we see you again, remain blessed and unstoppable. Goodbye.
Remember.
Thank you guys for doing this.
Remember to hustle faithfully.
Thank
you too, Ron.